So I'm curious, Keval, you're struggling with this inventory issue now. You've been running EchoStar for 2 years now?
Year and a half.
A year and a half, and you just announced NBC. Do you see the movement going forward? Do you see the model starting to take where you're adding value to the ecosystem?
Yes. So I think the two things that have happened in the TV business that makes it really, I think, opportune time to do this. One is that TV is becoming like the web. If you think about content explosion, audience fragmentation, the need for the long-tail networks to monetize their sort of small but relevant viewership, all of those things happened on the internet, mid to late 90s. And what you had was sort of rise of measurement. And measurement, if you can measure every click, measure every impression, you can just start providing transparency to all stakeholders. Users get to tell you what they like, what they don't like by switching on their remotes. NBC gets to see where is the true viewership. Is it really on NBC prime time, or is it on CNBC? Is it really on Chiller and Sleuth on a Friday night? And advertisers get to see where the actual demographic that's of interest to them is viewing their creative. So I think the simple answer is because TV is becoming like the web, all of the technologies and insights from the internet can be brought to bear on the world of television. The direct answer to your question is, we launched Dish about a year and a half ago in June of 2007. We launched Bloomberg last fall. We launched a couple of NBC networks now. We're going to launch a bunch of others. So clearly you see that publishers are seeing value in giving inventory to the marketplace and measuring it just like you'd measure it online.
Dan, I have a question. In your purview from Cisco, you give them the microphone. Do you think Cisco is the largest provider of infrastructure to these MSOs? Are they ready for this? Is that?
Absolutely. So Cisco is the largest provider of infrastructure into the MSOs, and what I really think is, to agree with what Yael and Carolyn were saying, this is an opportunity where we are going to create more land and more pie than has existed. This is 1 + 1 = 3. And what we have to get away from is the old argument about how to divide the one and get to how do we create the 3. And the reality for what we see is that this is an opportunity for television, not to repeat the example of the web, which actually in some way devalued publishers, but to create a new and really interesting situation where they can actually take share from other types of media and become, I think, more central. And that addressability will become a linchpin of being able to do that. In addition, I think the idea that, being able to work across data sets is also going to be very interesting to helping to create value in television. And that's where we see the network being able to play a huge role.
I think that it's a great transition, which is, I often ask when I started this, and we're going to transition with Conrad, a question to him is, I asked an economics professor when I first got into this business, if you make something more effective, will people spend more? Meaning, will they spend into the effectiveness? Will they spend the same amount because that's what their budget was and that was how the allocations were done independent of this? Or will they spend less because if you're buying a certain number of GRPs and you can achieve those targeted GRPs with less money, then you'll spend less and spend your money in something else. And so I'm curious, you see a lot of data on the internet, and you see it from publisher side and you see it from the buyer side. What goes on the internet, and what do you think it's going to go on into television?
Well, I think it's certainly true that it's not a zero-sum game. We have the opportunity to bring more advertisers into television, but that doesn't mean everyone wins either. I mean, we look at the print industry today. Obviously dollars have been taken away from there by more effective forms of advertising for various reasons. In terms of individual advertisers' ability to spend more, whether they will spend more, I think it's going to depend on the type of advertiser. I think you'll see shifts. Moving to addressability doesn't just mean sort of better targeting. It means, by its very nature, we've got much better data about what's taking place and how many impressions we've delivered. So if you're a CPG advertiser, whereas today, you probably can't afford to be in market more than 20, maybe 30, pushing 35 weeks of the year, just in terms of what you can actually afford. If you can reallocate those impressions, of course, a lot of your impressions to get the average frequency you want to go into people that are seeing really heavy users. If you can reallocate those impressions, then you might be able to run more effective campaigns for longer periods. You will be able to spend more money because your incremental cost, your effective CPM will be reduced, but you will be able to put more money to work effectively. So I think it'll work well there. I think there's other examples where You know, that's a great example where you've got a regular purchase cycle, sort of low consideration product. When you've got much wider periods of time between purchases, high consideration products, and where there's data available about those purchases. I mean, you mentioned the dog food ones and people focusing on your own products to start with. You've got to eat your dog food, right? So, and of course, as a provider of the you know, as an MSO, you've got data about what your customers have. You already have that data. And as more data sets are brought to bear, if you're an auto manufacturer, why would you be showing car ads to someone who's just bought a car? So you may see some reduction there. So you'll see shifts in different sectors and different verticals, I think.
Bob, in the words of Smokey Robinson, do you second that emotion?
I second the motion. No, I think that there's a precedent. I mean, when Nielsen moved from audit-based collection methodology in the grocery store to track the way products were sold or how much was sold, to scanner-based collection methodology, I mean, it's kind of what's going on in our business now. The tracking business collapsed, but then there was, you know, a whole category of other things like price promotion modeling, which caused a whole reallocation from marketing budgets into trade budgets. There was, you know, stocking configuration activity. You know, there was a whole new set of businesses that made the entire research and analytics business grow. But it caused for the CPG marketers a shift in money from marketing budgets into trade budgets. I think we'll see. I think who spends more, who spends less is kind of to be determined, but I think it's going to get really reallocated.
Well, let's try and determine it now. Matt, your clients, who do you think is going to spend more? I mean, do you buy this? Some people spend more, some people spend less?
Yeah, I buy it.
And what type of, and will you need real models to make these justifications, or is it going to be done on?
Well, it'll be really good when the conversation doesn't begin with a presupposed budget and an allocation that 70% of that budget is going to go to TV, which is unfortunately what happens now. So if it starts with what's our business objective, and then how can we correlate that business objective with our target audience receiving messages from us, then you end up with a very different conversation. So it doesn't really matter whether it's the television or the computer that you're coming in contact with the most relevant target. That's how budgets need to be set, and I would so much rather, as an agency, be paid based on my ability to connect message with right target than the amount of money that I'm spending on behalf of the client in order to do that.
And so the answer is to my question, who's
I'm
going
not
to...
interested in your question, Seth. I'm interested
I
in
think
my
the audience
answer.
is.
What was your question again? Will they spend more?
My
Will they
question
spend
is,
less?
who are some of the verticals who will spend more, who will spend into this for effectiveness, and who are some of the people who you think will depreciate in this?
Well, I mean, I would imagine that those that have a more expensive and more considered purchase will be the ones that will go for it first and invest most in it. But I also don't think you can really segregate by vertical. I think you can segregate by the client and the forward thinkingness of that client.
That's very interesting.
I agree. You know, my comment is, first of all, I think it's a big jump to assume that effective CPMs will not carry a premium. So, but assuming that that's true, I think that what we have done over the last couple of years is really had the ability to increase our marketing budget, and the way we did it was showing the objective bottom line results. So if we had something that was more effective, in the short term, I don't think budgets would increase, but I think what would happen, at least in our case, we would be able to prove to management how much marketing is driving the bottom line results, and then our budgets would increase.
You know, I just want to add to that. So somebody like Lisa, there's a lot of top companies now that most of the media is being purchased in procurement. At some point, the head of the procurement gets involved. And so you think about what that role is. It's a new role in this media conversation. And, you know, I'm a big believer, the more you can show that it is actually working and driving the bottom line, the more money it comes. Why wouldn't it, right? It's a question of gaining share for a lot of these companies. I think, you know, it's incumbent upon us in the industry to give advertisers enough data to show that we're moving their bottom line, or otherwise we frankly don't deserve more of the pie. We probably deserve less than we're getting now. And so it's all about delivering the objective on the advertiser. Sell more laptops, sell more pizza, whatever the object is.
Seth, you asked a microeconomics question, so I think the answer has to be microeconomics. I think if you look at economic theory, it would say your budget should be infinite as long as your marginal profit exceeds your marginal cost. So I think everybody's going to spend more money if they can measure the marginal profit from every incremental spend on TV advertising. I think print, the monetization of print shrank not because print itself has a problem as a medium, it's because viewers are not reading newspapers in print. So I think the end user is driving these huge tectonic shifts in monetization. I think TV, if you just look at the experience of all of us in this room, I mean, I don't think the rise of internet has reduced our television viewing by any means, certainly not mine. I'm just viewing my TV on the internet some cases, or viewing it in a time-shifted fashion. So I think the budgets will keep rising, and in fact, new advertisers will come to television if you lower the barriers to entry and you increase the pie. I think that's something that we talked about earlier here.
There's a couple of things from the success of addressable advertising on the internet, which I think are really relevant to get more advertisers involved and to help people spend more money. I mean, the best example, obviously, of addressable advertising is search. It works phenomenally well, and one aspect of it is addressable and decision made is context-based. But there's two really important other factors that make it work so well. One is it's really measurable, and I'm not suggesting that all of our television should move to people are going to click on ads, because a lot of the money that's spent today isn't about getting people to stop consuming media. It's about influencing their perceptions and attitudes.
And a lot of the value.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think there's one other piece that's very interesting as well, and it's about the streamlined process and how the process works for purchasing and allocation. And in search, the targeting is demand-driven. The buy side, who should be able to, with the right data, know what is working best for them, what they believe to be the most. This is different when you're buying sponsorships or when you're buying individual impressions. They have a way where it's very straightforward for them to specify what they want, go out and buy it, and that operates at scale through the infrastructure. And that scale is really important because people do want targeting, but we really need reach as well.
Dan, at Cisco, you must face a very parallel situation, which you make routers cheaper and cheaper and switches cheaper and cheaper. And you must face the concerns, which is, does your efficiency outprice the market?
Yeah, I was actually thinking of a different analogy, but let me start with that. Of course, the reality is that we always have to do that, and we've had to live in a world always where unit volume has to outpace pricing declines. And we've learned that we can live in that world, and you keep running and you keep going. But the other analogy I was thinking of was actually, for a long time when I first joined Cisco 16 years ago, Conrad, when I was 12, in case you were doing the math. When I joined Cisco, we used to have this running debate about the phone network and the internet, right? And how do we make the two of them work together, right? And the reality was that the internet was disruptive enough that it actually created a set of opportunities for those phone providers that were much bigger than trying to create the phone network and the internet to work together, right? It was the wrong question. How many panels did we all sit on? Did the phone and the internet work together? What happens, right? In the same way, the disruption here is so fundamental. It's for the first time. In the past, we always had to guess. Now we know, right? And because we know, we can create a lot more value at a lot more efficiency, theoretically. And hopefully that we can have a network that can deliver those things, ultimately to a way that someone finds value.
Let me ask you a question. Jerry, you ran what I consider one of the first real seminal addressable advertising campaigns, and maybe you can talk about it. You made a decision without thinking about models or money. What was going through your mind, and how much of that was a creative choice?
So the campaign that Seth's talking about is, I previously ran advertising on a global basis for United Airlines, and we were launching TED at the time. TED is now dead, but at the time, that's right, not in my mind, I'm still there. But at the time, we were trying to create a very differentiated experience within the same airline. And so using addressable television, it was down to the node level, I believe, we could speak directly to the suburb in Chicago and say, Barrington, say hello to Ted, Glen Ellen, say hello to Ted. And so it wasn't anything other than a creative decision to try to use this technology to create a personality for the brand.
So, I think that's a very important, because as we think about before what it takes to start, I think sometimes these, having seen how addressability got going, that application got more people moving than all of the models we saw, because it inspired people to do things. And I think it's always a tricky thing to sort of say, when is it inspiration and when is it a model and things like that. Yeah, I'm curious. You sit around and think about how people.
I'm all inspiration, Seth.
How do you think people are going to make these decisions about? Do I go forward? Do I adopt? If you're a if you're someone who represents the media side, how do they make the decision? Have the confidence to say, like Carolyn did, if this is going to sell more laptops, we're going to do it. I've heard a lot of network people say, inefficiency is my friend. I get a lot of revenue. That statement has been said to me a lot of times. How do people have the confidence to break away from something like that?
Well, I think part of it is the competition point, but I do think part of it is just being a little more granular than effectiveness and efficiency allows. I mean, those words are immediately spark visceral reactions. Of course, efficiency in the mind of folks who, you know, bundle things sounds scary, but when you really look at the base of advertisers on television today and say, okay, if they could absolutely target whomever they want. You know, the vast majority of these guys actually want to speak to everybody. Okay, so there's the dog owners. We can all imagine these scenarios, and that's what we talk about. But really, there are a lot of very big spenders who want to talk to everybody. You know, at the upper part of the funnel when they're really trying to induce consideration. Now, there's I think there's a strong argument for more dollars flowing in down funnel at moments of call to action, and then new guys coming in like DR guys. But I think when we have to change the vocabulary. I think efficiency is scary. I think, you know, the media providers get to set the rules. If we're not, you know, disaggregating spots necessarily, and we're talking about, you know, just different messaging and how can we create value, I think there are forms of efficiency that really actually create value for the media provider that are not about a la carte unbundling.